Hello my friends, HM here. Now in this video I'm attempting to do something super ambitious. I'm going to make a victory plan for Ukraine. This is something I've been thinking about and researching for almost half a year, and now it is finalized enough so that I think I can make a video about it and show it to the world. It's not just a video, it's also written down all the details, how much this will cost, what kind of decisions that the US and Europe will have to make for the permission of use of their weapons, exactly what weapons we are talking about, how it will affect the Russian war effort, etc., etc. It's a lot of things I want to talk about, and this video could go on for like many hours if I wanted to say all of it. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to make this video fairly short, where I'll give you the big picture of this plan and the weapons that Ukraine need. And then I'm going to publish the full written plan on my website so you can download it and see for yourself if you need all the nitty-gritty details. But if you think this sounds interesting, keep watching. Now, before we begin, I would like you to help me a little bit. Give my video a like and also subscribe to my channel, because I need to grow my channel in order to continue making these videos. And if you really like my video, there are many opportunities to support me directly financially. If you are a premium subscriber, you can click this thanks button and then pick an amount and send it to me. Also, I got Buy Me a Coffee and PayPal and Patreon that you can use to support me. Again, you can always unsubscribe or undo a like button if you don't like this video. By the way, in this video I'm going to talk about all the methods there are to stop the Ukrainian glider bombs, because they are part of this victory plan. The glider bombs that are dropped from Russian aircraft 70 kilometers behind the front lines, they're killing thousands of Ukrainian heroes every month, and it has to stop. And this plan I have here has all the ways that this can stop. So that'll be part of the video. But anyway, let's get to it. Now, this spreadsheet that you can see here is the plan, the victory plan for Ukraine. It contains a lot of information, and I have organized it in a spreadsheet because you can make calculations in a spreadsheet, and that's needed for going a little bit deeper. Then you always need to calculate something. So I like to organize it in an Excel spreadsheet. Plus, you can have in one sheet, you can have an awful lot of information, because you can just click a cell here. I click just one cell here. It's a launch platform. And then you click the cell for that, and for that weapon here, for the JASSMs, and then you can read more about all the launch platforms that are for this weapons. There are some weapons down here, and I've organized these weapons in 3 categories. One category is large long-range missiles, they're listed here. And the other category is anti-aircraft systems that are listed here. And then down here we have AirForce weapons that are listed here. Then I also have some weapons that are highlighted here below in pale red. These are problematic weapons that Ukraine would love to have, but they can't have them because either they are needed somewhere else in the world, like these 2 here are needed in Taiwan, so Ukraine can't have them, or there can be other problems with the weapons. But let's dig a little bit deeper into these weapons and why they are needed. Now, in this table I have also highlighted 15 weapons that Ukraine doesn't currently have, but that Ukraine should have. They're highlighted here in red. Ukraine should definitely have these weapons, and they are game-changing. They will really enable Ukraine to kill many, many times more Russians than they currently kill today, and that will force Russia to pull out. Because the thing is, Russia will only pull out and end the war if their losses become intolerable high. If their losses are very high, they pull out. That's how you end a war, by inflicting more losses on your enemy. Now I want to tell you a little bit about how to end wars and how not to end wars. But so I have to show you this guy here. This is the National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan that has been responsible for the Joe Biden administration's policy of de-escalation. De-escalation only projects weakness to the enemy. And if you project weakness to a predator, that predator will simply attack more. That's how nature works among animals, and we also are animal humans. If you watch any BBC documentary, say with David Attenborough, about how predator animals and prey animals are behaving on the African savanna, you will see that the lions will scare the horde of prey animals around in order to spot the weakest prey in the flock or horde. And then they go in for an attack on the weakest prey, because you always attack the weakest. That's the least risky. You don't risk getting kicked back in your head, and actually even a lion can die from being wounded by a prey animal if it's a strong prey animal, but that chance is just less if it's a weak animal. So Jake Sullivan's policy of depriving Ukraine of the weapons that can make Ukraine win because they can inflict enormous casualties on Russians, that's a policy of weakness. And that just incentivizes Russia to go even harder in, because now they can see they have a chance. Ukraine can't fight. They are handcuffed by Jake Sullivan, who thinks that's a good policy. He thinks that if you hold back, then the Russians will also hold back. That's his belief. But that's not how a predator thinks. And Russia is a predator nation. They'll just attack even more. So if we have any chance of winning this war for democracy and freedom in Ukraine, we need to leave and abandon this hopeless, wrong policy of de-escalation. We need to escalate to make Russia lose. And that's how my victory plan for Ukraine is composed. It's composed of the most effective weapons at inflicting losses on Russia, so they become unsustainable for Russia, and so that they know, oh, we have to pull out. We'll try our luck with somebody else who is weaker. Because Russia has said they have no borders, they will just attack their neighbors, whoever is weaker, in order to expand their empire. That's how Russia functions today. They have said it openly. Russia has no borders. That's what Putin has said. But let's get back to the plan here and see the weapons that can really inflict a lot of losses on Russia. So let's start by looking at these long-range missiles that are ground attack weapons. They are fired from ground or air, and they are attacking ground targets. So what can they do? Let's click this cell here to read what I have written in this cell here. So the main effect here will be, 1, to destroy Russian logistics. That's done by large rockets that are hitting bridges up to 200 kilometers inside of Russia. So all their logistics of bringing weapons and ammunition to the front lines, and also fuel, very importantly, are destroyed. The second goal here is to use these weapons to force Russian Air Force 1,500 kilometers away from Ukraine. That can be done by targeting air bases in Russia with these weapons that are plentiful up to about 1,500 kilometers inside of Russia. Ukraine can get these weapons. So if the Russian Air Force is forced back with their aircraft, then they can only attack Ukraine if they're using fuel tankers. Problem with Russian Air Force is they only have 20 fuel tankers. So it will minimize drastically the number of aircraft that they can attack Ukraine with if their air force is pushed back and they have to use these 20 fuel tankers to get any attacks on Ukraine, among those the glider bombs. So that's one way to minimize the number of attacks from these glider bombs that are killing thousands of heroes every month in Ukraine. Okay, so what else can it do? These ground attack weapons can also be used to destroy Russian S-300 and S-400 anti-aircraft batteries. These anti-aircraft batteries are very capable weapons. They have long-range missiles that they can fire from ground vehicles against Ukrainian helicopters and aircraft, and it means that Ukraine is unable to get close to the front line. So Ukraine is not able to drop inexpensive glider bombs on Russian front lines. But Russia is able to drop inexpensive glider bombs on Ukraine front lines because Ukraine currently do not have any air defense systems that can shoot down the Russian aircraft. They're simply too far from the front line for the range that the air defense systems that Ukraine currently have is capable of. So they need better air defense systems, and that's part of this strategy. I've found the weapons that can do it. Okay, so what else can we do? So these S-300 and S-400 batteries, of course, they can be located. They can be spotted by some surveillance drones, and then you can send some of these missiles to destroy them. Another thing here is you can destroy weapons production and ammunition storage with these weapons, of course, inside Russia. Lots of targets for that. And finally, that's a joker, a wild card, because it's likely that Israel will not sell it. But there is an ICBM, an intercontinental ballistic missile, that Israel is producing. It's called the Jericho III, and it can hit anywhere in Russia because it has enormous range. It's down here 11,000 kilometers. That means it covers every single spot in Russia, and that means this missile could be used to target and destroy factories that are producing ballistic missiles for Russia that are targeting Ukraine. And they can also be used to destroy this very important aircraft, the Russian A50 aircraft. They only have 6 of those left. And this aircraft is guiding the long-range anti-aircraft missiles from Russia. So if they don't have this aircraft, then they can't use their anti-aircraft systems to fire long-range rockets against Ukrainian aircraft. And that will allow Ukraine to start using their aircraft to get much closer to the front line and start dropping glider bombs on Russian positions if they can just get these A50 aircraft out of commission. There are other ways to destroy these aircraft, and I'll come back to that in this plan here. Yeah, perhaps before I move on, I should say that this plan I have developed for Ukraine about the weapons they need in order to stop Russia and kick them out, because it will inflict enormous casualties on Russia if they get these weapons. Everybody should pay attention to this plan because it's exactly the same weapons that will be used to prevent Russia from attacking any other of their neighbor states like Finland, Norway, that shares borders with Russia, and also Poland and many other countries. They all need to have the exact same weapons in order to be effective at defending against attacks from Russia. And I can tell you this going back to my story about how the animals on the African savanna are fighting. If you are armed to the teeth with the right kind of weapons, war will not happen. You will not be attacked by the predator animal because it can see, oh, you are very strong. I run a high risk of being injured myself if I attack you, and it's much easier for me to concentrate on a weak prey where the work and the risk is far less for the same gain of meat to eat. So pay attention, every other country also outside of Ukraine, about how these weapons are, because you are going to need the same weapons. But let's move on. Now, the first weapon I want to bring attention to is this AGM-158a JASSMs. It's a stealth cruise missile, and they come in 2 versions. One is a shorter range version with 370 kilometers range, and then down here we have a B version that has more range with 926 kilometers range. These 2 weapons are very good for Ukraine because the United States have a lot of them on storage. They've been producing them for many years. They have 7,500 of the shortest range weapons on stock, and then they have 3,500 of the longer range weapon on stock. Let me bring in a video that will show you how effective they are at destroying various topics before I move on to talk about some of the other specifications and why this is a very good weapon for Ukraine. So let me bring that video in here. Let's start it. Here, this was an aircraft that is dropping them, and Ukraine can drop this using their F16 fighters. Now here, the missile is detonating at impact. It is a bunker-busting weapon, so it can also penetrate deep into a bunker and then detonate inside the bunker. But here it has been programmed to detonate immediately when it touches a surface. That configuration will be used to destroy aircraft in Russian air bases. So you attack an airbase, and if the airplanes here around on this airbase, let's imagine this was an airbase, then of course many of these airplanes will be destroyed by this weapon. So it can be used to attack air bases. But let's play the video again, because I want you to see some other, and it's a powerful weapon. It's 450 kilo warhead. This one I want you to see. Now here, I'll stop it here. Here the missile is coming down. Here we have a concrete structure. And by the way, this missile is like 6 meters long. So here we are talking 4 meters of reinforced concrete. And look at this. It penetrates it like butter. It just goes right through it. And then it detonates inside this structure. These are all test videos, so I can show them without getting banned here on YouTube, no problem, because it's not showing real war. Anyway, this is how effective this weapon is, and of course it can be used to destroy bridges. It's very effective for destroying bridges. It can basically go into the concrete of this bridge, in the founding pillars of a bridge, and then blow up inside the concrete and bring these bridges down. This weapon should start by destroying the Kerch Bridge, of course. That's the most important bridge for bringing supplies into a large part of the battlefield in Ukraine. And they only need 4 of these missiles to bring that bridge completely down. It could take the 2 main pylons that are holding the main span on that bridge. They can be completely destroyed with 4 of these weapons. And Russia cannot stop this weapon because it's stealth, so they really can't see it. They can't target it using anti-aircraft systems that they have. So it's a perfect weapon. It's super plentiful and it's stealth. Now another great thing about this weapon here is that it doesn't cost a lot. It's an old weapon. It has been produced for a long time, and you can see it only costs $700,000 for one of these weapons. Ukraine, I estimate, will need about 1,800 of them, of this short-range version. That's only a small part of the US stocks, and that will only cost $1.2 billion for these weapons. It's not that Ukraine will receive all 1,800 weapons at once. No, they will receive like 150 of them every month for 12 months. Ukraine already got some F-16 fighter jets. Each F-16 can bring up and launch 2 every time it flies a sortie. It can have 2 under the wings, and it can probably fly several sorties per day because they just go up, go to the launch position, and then they launch them and go back, and then they can pick more weapons up and launch them again. So I'd say Ukraine has plenty of capacity to just use the F-16 fighter jets to launch this weapon at a rate of 150 per month. But of course, if Ukraine can get even more weapons, like 300 per month, that'll be better, because the sooner all these bridges are destroyed that are bringing in weapons from Russia to the battlefield, the sooner this effect of Russia not having heavy weapons, not having fuel to drive their tanks and infantry vehicles and propelled artillery, the sooner that effect will be felt. So it's just about getting as many of these missiles to Ukraine as fast as possible, so they can fire them as fast as possible, so they can destroy all these bridges as fast as possible, and then the effect will come to Ukraine's advantage. Also, the other weapon down here, the JASSM's B missile, the US have 3,500 of that weapon, and it's also very affordable, about 1 million apiece. So 600 of those I estimate that Ukraine should have, and that'll only be $600 million. So very, very affordable, and Ukraine can get like 50 of those per month. So they can launch like 200 of these missiles per month. There's another sheet here in this spreadsheet that have some extra information that's worth noticing. Look at this. I have gathered information about the intensity and scale of armed conflict. And here we can see Russian weapons use in Ukraine. I have these cruise missiles and ballistic missiles that Russia are using over Ukraine. They're launching about 175 of these weapons, which are comparable to this JASSM missiles, every month. And Ukraine could also, if they were given these weapons, they could launch a similar number on even a larger number on Russia. And also, how many missiles are Ukraine able to launch on Russia currently in this war? I have it down here on cruise missiles and ballistic missiles. That would be the Storm Shadow that Ukraine get, plus the attackers. How many do you think they get? They're getting about 17 of these weapons every month, 1/10 of what Russia is attacking Ukraine with. That doesn't make any sense. And that's the policy of Jake Sullivan, who says, oh, we'll hold back, and then it's the hope that Russia will also hold back. The exact opposite will happen, as I explained before. So we need to stop this policy that is going to lead to the defeat of democracy and freedom, not only in Ukraine, but everywhere, if we continue with de-escalation. No, we escalate until we kick them out. And we keep escalating until they're out, and then we de-escalate. Okay, then we achieved our objectives, just to keep them out of our territory and not let them enslave us. I think that's a fair objective to have. But let's get back to this list here with the weapons. As you can see, this AGM-158b tops out at a range of 926 kilometers. Ukraine need a weapon with even more range, because they need to push back the Russian Air Force further than just 900 kilometers. So they need a longer range weapon. And I have that down here. It's a Tomahawk Block V cruise missile that Ukraine can use. Now that cruise missile, for Ukraine to launch that weapon, they will need a ground launcher. Fortunately, a new ground launcher has been made by the US. It's called Typhon. but it's very new. It was first operational in 2023, and they have only built 2 of these systems. Maybe 3, but I know of at least 2 systems that I can confirm that the US have built. Now, Ukraine only need 1 of these launchers, but they really need that weapon, and Ukraine should have that weapon so they can fire this Tomahawk missile. They can also fire an anti-aircraft missile that has the range to take down the Russian aircraft that are dropping glider bombs, but I'll come back to that. Ukraine will only need 200 of these Tomahawk missiles. That'll be enough to scare the Russians further back with their aircraft and have that effect from that. And maybe I should show you a little picture of how this system looks. This is the ground launch system here. So it's simply a vehicle, it's a container, and then it erects a launcher. And then there are 4 tubes here for 4 missiles, say 4 Tomahawk missiles that can be fired. Let me see if I can find another. There's this illustration here. You can see normally a full Typhoon system has 4 launch vehicles. Ukraine just need 1 launch vehicle. Then it needs a control platform that is controlling the launches here. And then it needs a transport vehicle that are transporting missiles to this launch vehicle. And then there's another one, it's probably a generator with electricity to power these vehicles. So that's really a very simple system. I think a system of this vehicle and 1 of these launchers, Ukraine can probably get that for $300 million. And it will do enormous damage to Russia by forcing their Air Force back, and also by starting shooting down some of the Russian aircraft that actually get to Ukraine, because it can do that. So it's absolutely necessary that Ukraine get just 1 of these launchers. Now, in this PowerPoint presentation, it says that the Tomahawk is a future capability. That's because it's an old PowerPoint presentation. I have a little video here I can show you where this launch system, the Typhoon, I'll play it. It's actually launching 1 of these Tomahawk. This is a Tomahawk missile coming out of it. So it has already been proved for Tomahawk. It can do that. And this missile launcher, the Typhoon system, is also being made available for that JASSMs. Let me bring this out. I talked about this JASSM system here. There are 2 newer variants. The US are no longer producing neither this short-range JASSMs and not this extended-range JASSMs. They are no longer produced. They are producing these 2 successors here that have much more range and are far more capable, because they can also target ships and land targets. And these 2 rockets are also in the process of being made able to launch from this Typhoon system. Plus other shorter range anti-aircraft rockets will be launched from this Typhoon system. So this Typhoon system is a really, really important platform that all of NATO should have many of, and also Taiwan. I saw a Russian website saying that the US Army had ordered 16 of these Typhoon systems, but they're not in full production yet, because they're still in the process of fine-tuning these systems so they can fire many more types of missiles. And once they have settled that down, then they start mass producing them. But I'd say that one of these prototypes versions, you could say, where they're testing these firing of these missiles from, ship that to Ukraine immediately, because it's already found out that it's capable of firing 2 of the most important missiles that Ukraine need, which is the Tomahawk and also this other anti-aircraft missile that I'm going to talk about in a moment. They can fire those, so Ukraine just need 1 of these systems and they should get it. Now there's only 1 more weapon I want to mention, and it's this Jericho III. It's an ICBM, or intercontinental ballistic missile, and Israel is making it. I think it's the only intercontinental ballistic missile that can be launched from a ground launcher, so Ukraine can get it. Because they can use a ground launcher to launch it from. So it's the only such missile in the world that Ukraine can actually get from a country. The US don't even make it, and there are no other democratic and free countries in the world that are making it. Of course, China are making them, and Russia are making them, perhaps even Pakistan, I don't know. But Ukraine should try to get 20 of these, and they could get like 0.8 per month delivered to Ukraine that they can fire at targets deep inside Russia, because it can cover all of Russia. There won't be a factory producing weapons or ammunition depot that Ukraine will not be able to target with this weapon. But really what it should hunt for is these A50 radar aircraft that Russia has only 6 left of. Because if Ukraine can get these aircraft destroyed, then the whole air defense system of Russia is becoming far less effective because they can't really fire their very long-range anti-aircraft missiles, and that means Ukraine can start using cheap glider bombs on the Russian forces. That'll be very important, and that's what this weapon should be used for. But as you can also see, these missiles are very expensive. They cost 15 million US dollars a piece. So it's by far the most expensive missile in this list here. But they're worth it if you can get one of these A50 aircraft taken out, or if you can destroy a Shahid drone factory and thereby save Ukraine from a lot of attacks from Russia. So let's move on to the next category of weapons that I have down here. That would be the anti-aircraft systems. Now, the first thing I want to say about anti-aircraft systems is that we have all been talking about that Ukraine should have more Patriot batteries, and Ukraine has also asked for more Patriot batteries. But actually, what Ukraine really needs is not more of these Patriot batteries, because this Patriot battery is not very effective anti-aircraft system. It is for short range and mid-range kills, but it isn't a long-range anti-aircraft system, not by today's standard. And we can see that the longest range interceptor this Patriot system has is this Skyceptor PAC-4 missile that has a range of 180 kilometers. 180 kilometers is not enough for what Ukraine needs. Ukraine needs to place these Patriot systems 100 kilometers behind the front lines, because otherwise it will be too easy for Russia to destroy these systems. And that means the missiles they are firing can only reach 80 kilometers behind the front line towards Russian aircraft. The problem is that Russia is dropping glider bombs from 70 kilometers behind the front line. That means in principle the Patriot system could shoot down such an aircraft. But the thing is, as soon as Russia has dropped this glider bomb, then it dives down and goes below the radar and becomes invisible to this Patriot system. So it can't shoot them down, not with this range. What Ukraine really need is some super long range weapons that have much longer range than 180 kilometers, and where the guidance for these missiles is done by an airborne radar that can also look down and see airplanes that are flying low. It can even see vehicles moving around on the ground. Such an aircraft is this Hawkeye 2D version, the newest version of this Hawkeye. It has a range of 640 kilometers, and I have found out exactly where this Hawkeye can safely operate so that it's out of harm's way from getting shot down itself by Russian anti-aircraft systems. It should be 250 kilometers behind the front lines. And there's a city here, it's called a Ukrainian city, it's called Cherkasy, where this airplane should be staged. And I'll show you what I'm talking about here by bringing in a map. So let me blow this up so we can see it a little bit better and zoom in. So I have a city, this Cherkasy city, where Hawkeye should be operating. It should just be circling around here. And then I have put out the radar range of this aircraft of 640 kilometers. And as you can see in this map here, it will cover all of the front lines and well beyond the front lines, like 300 kilometers behind the front lines. It can see the Russian aircraft. And just one aircraft, one Hawkeye, can cover the entire battlefield in Ukraine. They only need one. Now, what radar aircraft have we actually delivered to Ukraine? Let me bring this out again. What we have delivered is down here. We have delivered two Swedish aircraft has been pledged. I'm not sure they are fully operational, staffed with Ukrainians that can actually use them yet. But we have delivered these Saab 340. They only have 400 kilometers range, probably because Mike Sullivan said, well, they can't have the Hawkeye because that will be a really effective thing, and then they can start operating their weapons effectively. So we'll give them this short-range radar aircraft. Let me show you why that's a big problem. I have another map here where I've set up 400 kilometers range, and it's in the safe position there in Ukraine. Can you see what the problem is with this 400 kilometers range is? It can only cover this part here down on the front line, barely. But over here where the main fighting is, this is the number one killing ground. We zoom in, we can see there's a lot of fighting going on here. It doesn't even reach to the front line itself. The front line is right here. The radar stops short here. It needs to go hundreds of kilometers behind that front line. So a large part of the front line, like from here to basically also all of this, it's not being covered enough by this radar aircraft. It's only useful down here in the Kherson region. That's where it has enough range. It's just mind-blowingly stupid how we are thinking about these weapons. It is as if those people who are managing this whole thing don't have a clue about how war is being fought. And I'm saying that as a YouTuber. I have basically no military background. All I know about war is something I have studied up myself, used ChatGPT to get answers to my questions, and then simply spent a lot of hours on it getting knowledgeable about it. I have been in the military as a conscript in the Danish army. That's it. But of course, I have all the time, and many of these politicians, they have all kind of other problems, so they never really get any understanding of what war is about, but they should. It's their responsibility to make the big decisions here, and they should surround themselves with advisors that can tell them how war functions, but they are not. This Jake Sullivan guy, he definitely doesn't know anything about war and how it functions because of this de-escalation nonsense that also European politicians are spewing out. I don't know what they all got it from, that de-escalation is working in any way. It's exactly the opposite result that will happen. Russia will escalate if you de-escalate. That's what will happen. And Russia will de-escalate if you escalate. Then they will pull out and end the war because not worth it if you have massive casualties. That's why we need to escalate. But okay, let's get back to this weapons table. As I said, number one thing is to bring some Hawkeye to Ukraine so they can get this radar coverage of the battlefield and also have this airplane that can guide long-range anti-aircraft missiles that Ukraine can fire towards the Russian aircraft. And also, how many Hawkeyes should Ukraine have? Well, they should probably, here in my table I've said they should have 4 because they can't fly non-stop. The crew get tired, and normally US aircraft carriers, they have 4 of these Hawkeyes on board to provide radar coverage for an aircraft carrier. And Ukraine can also manage with 4. Now, in the very long run, they should probably have 8 because they might risk having some of them shut down, who knows, and 8 would be preferable, but at least 4, get that up and running, and then you have time to do maintenance also on these aircraft, and the pilots can get some rest in between, and then they'll have 24/7 coverage of the battlefield with these aircraft. So if you have this Hawkeye, what can you then do? Well, there are 2 weapon systems that you can get. You can get the Israeli David Sling battery that are firing a missile, an anti-aircraft missile that's called the Stunner missile, and it has a range of 300 kilometers. 300 kilometers if you place the launcher 100 kilometers behind the front line, so it has lower risk of being destroyed itself by Russia. Then it can fire 200 kilometers beyond the front line. That's plenty to down the Russian aircraft throwing glider bombs at the Ukrainian troops, so they can start killing these aircraft. And how many do I think they should have here? 200 of these Stunner missiles, and then 2 of these David Sling batteries that can fire these missiles. They also need another missile. It's RIM 174. It's also more easily shortened for SM-6 missile. It's an anti-aircraft missile. It can also hit ballistic missiles. It can even hit ground targets and ships. It can hit everything, and it can be fired from anything, from air, from ground launcher, the Typhon, the same as the one that launches this Tomahawk. It's a very good weapon. It's also very expensive. They cost 5 million each, these missiles, but it has longer range. It has 370 kilometers range. Now, the Israeli weapon is super duper because it costs only $700,000 for this missile, so Ukraine can get more missiles for the same money if they buy that one. Problem is, Israel need these weapons themselves because they are at their own war, and they badly need these Stunner missiles themselves, and I would say it's not realistic to think that Ukraine can get, say, more than 200 of these missiles over the next 2 years. That means they get 8 of these missiles per month. But they could down $100 million Russian aircraft with each of these missiles every time they fire them. I have said they should get Ukraine 360 of these SM-6 missiles that they also can fire. That means they get 15 of those per month if they are delivered over 2 years. Again, even all the missile system and the Hawkeye Hawkeye, and if you sum it up, what will it all cost approximately per month? We are talking $143 million per month for these systems to be delivered to Ukraine over a 2-year period. It's very little money. It's easily something that Europe can pay for. But of course, Israel should be willing to sell. United States should be willing to sell their Hawkeye and also this SM-6 missile. But it's the best way to destroy the air force of our number one enemy, which is Russia. So therefore we should do it. I should also mention that I have studied all the air defense systems that exist in the world, and these two ones I'm mentioning here, the SM-6 and also the Stunner missiles from Israel, they're the only two that are available for Ukraine because they are produced in the free and democratic world. Other capable systems, they're all produced either in Russia or China. So this is really what Ukraine have to pick from. There are only these two systems. Now there are a few other missiles, but they're more exotic. I have one down here. It's called the Arrow 3. It's an anti-ballistic missile system and also an anti-satellite system. It has an enormous range of 2,400 kilometers. It's Israeli made, and it's made to, if Iran fires some ballistic missiles towards Israel, then they will be detected by an Israeli satellite that will detect the heat signature from these ballistic missiles, and then they can start firing these Arrow-free missiles to shoot incoming Iranian missiles down. They'll be shot down in space. They go all the way up in space, these ballistic missiles, and they'll be hit in space. This missile can even go up and destroy a satellite in orbit. Now, I have studied this weapon, the Arrow 3, quite a lot, and also have studied some other weapons that the US is making that are kind of comparable. But I found out that the Israeli weapons, but I'll make a video about it, I believe the Israeli weapon can do much more than shooting down ballistic missiles in space and also satellites. It can also shoot down aircraft, large aircraft flying high up, because these large aircraft flying high up, they can also be seen by infrared signature. It's a large aircraft, it has a lot of heat from its jet engines, and it's flying high up, meaning the heat signature will be stronger because there's not so much atmosphere that is weakening the signal. Now, this satellite system cannot see jets, small jets flying low, because there's simply not enough heat from them to be detectable from space. But large aircraft flying high will be detectable, and I believe this missile that Israel has built is capable of shooting down large aircraft over Iran because they can see it using their satellites from space. And also I think that this missile can hit targets on ground where it simply uses the GPS signal to hit something on the ground. It has a warhead, as you can see. Let me get my mouse. It has a pretty heavy warhead for this missile. It's 150 kilo warhead, and it's blast fragmentation. Israel could use this weapon to kill the leadership of Iran if they're flying in a presidential airplane, or they could kill them on the ground while they're holding a public speak in a mosque or something. They could just go right through the roof there and explode on the chair they are speaking from, and then they can kill them. Israel has not formally announced that it has this capability, but I'm sure it has this capability because of the things I've found out about this weapon, but I'll make a video about it forthcoming. Ukraine should get this weapon from Israel if they possibly can, and then they can use it to target the Russian radar aircraft, the A50, and shoot that down from, 2,400 kilometers away. That would be great. That's another way to get rid of this A50 aircraft that Russia desperately need to control their long-range anti-aircraft missiles. So I thought I should mention that. Now I won't talk more about these anti-aircraft weapons. Let's go down and take a look at the Air Force weapons that Ukraine also need. Now for these Air Force weapons that I've listed down here, you can see I've listed two aircraft. The Super Hornet aircraft that Ukraine don't currently have, and also the F16 that Ukraine now got an increasing number of. My own country, Denmark, has contributed to Ukraine by giving half of our F16 fighter jets to Ukraine. The other half was sold to, I think it was Argentina. The United States kind of forced us to do that. We wanted to give all our aircraft to Ukraine, but the US wanted Argentina to have them so they could become dependent on supplies, spare parts and stuff from the US. That's a way for countries to get more leverage over other countries. If they're exporting weapons to them, then the receiving countries of those weapons kind of have to play nice with the suppliers of these weapons. But that was a little sidestep. I thought that actually it would be a game changer at first when I didn't know much about these weapons, that Ukraine would get F-16 fighter jets, because I thought now they could finally shoot down the Russian fighter jets. But they just can't. The problem is that these F-16s cannot get within range of the Russian fighter jets because Russia has these long-range anti-aircraft missiles that will shoot them down if they get too close to the front line. So they have to stay about 100 kilometers behind the front line in order to minimize risk of being shot down by Russian anti-aircraft rockets. And you can also see what kind of weapons can this F-16 fire? Well, the weapons it can fire will pretty much depend on how long the range of its internal radar is. And I have found out the internal radar of those that are sent to Ukraine. They are made in 1980 and they only have a range of about 83 kilometers. So they can't even have a radar range that can see the front line. That's how bad that is. And that's why these aircraft can only shoot short-range anti-aircraft missiles. Like they have got the AIM-7 Sparrow missile. It has 70 kilometers range, and they also got some other short-range anti-aircraft missiles that they are using. All of these anti-aircraft missiles are used to hunt for Russian Shahed drones and also Russian cruise missiles, and for that they're very good. They're definitely helping Ukraine to stop some of the Russian Shahed drones and cruise missiles that are coming towards Ukraine. The aircraft that Ukraine really need would be this Super Hornet. The Super Hornet has a radar that can see 370 kilometers out. A huge increase from the 83 kilometers that the old F-16 can see. And this radar will enable these Super Hornet aircraft, if it's outfitted with this radar. It's a newer radar, so standard Super Hornet, I think, doesn't come with it. So it has to be outfitted with this radar here. And it's quite expensive. That upgrade will cost $35 million. But it will enable the Super Hornet to fire this SM-6 missile that we also saw that Ukraine could fire with the Typhon ground launcher. But there's another version that has been made here, available here in the summer 2024, that can also fire this from the Super Hornet, the SM-6 missile. And it can also fire the AIM-260, which is also a very long-range missile that is brand new, again, just made operational for the Super Hornet here in 2024. And this weapon has 220 kilometers range. Now, these ranges are enough to hit Russian fighter jets dropping glider bombs at the front line. So if Ukraine get this Super Hornet, and I think they should get just 20 of these Super Hornet, they can go up and hunt for Russian fighter jets because they have the weapons that has the range to hit the Russian fighter jets. They can hit them from 100 kilometers behind the front lines where they are fairly safe from the Russian long-range anti-aircraft missiles. So that's just a weapon that Ukraine absolutely must have. Also, you could say, well, that will take time. Yes, it will take time. Ukrainian F-16 fighter pilots should probably get 6 more months of training in order to fly a Super Hornet because many of the things look the same, and I don't think it will take a year or two to train a Ukrainian fighter pilot on this Super Hornet when they have already learned how to fly an F-16. And also, what can we see here? How much does all these things cost? If Ukraine get all these weapons I've talked about in this table here, all of it will cost $12 billion. Now, we have donated for this war so far, both financially and military, upwards of $400 billion. So it's just tiny little money compared to all the money that has been poured into this war. But I guarantee you, had we donated these weapons earlier, this war would already have ended by now. We are donating a lot of inefficient weapons that are very costly. We should donate the right weapons, and the right weapons are in this table. And we should use them the right way by attacking Russia where it hurts the most, not by de-escalation and banning Ukraine from using their weapons. That's what we need to do in order for democracy and freedom to prevail in Ukraine. And quite frankly, if Russia just roll over Ukraine, we will be next. And if we keep up with this de-escalation policy, all of democracy and freedom in the entire free world will be rolled over by China, Russia, and Iran. There won't be any democracy to be happy about. We need to start defending ourselves as effectively as possible so that nobody are going to attack us. But I think I should probably not make my video any longer. This spreadsheet, there's a link below the video. You can follow it and everybody can download this spreadsheet. And this spreadsheet has a lot more information than just this war plan for Ukraine. As I said, it also had this sheet here where you had weapons use. It also has a weapons specification page. This is the one I have here, where I have almost 300 different weapons that I have detailed in much detail. I've taught myself about how all these weapons functions. It's a gold mine of information about war and understanding war situations that you can download. And it's all free. You can use it for free. I've gathered all that data. I want to say before we close off, to remind you again, it takes me a lot of time to make these videos here. So I urge you to give a donation if you can and subscribe and give it a like. And also, I'm very interested to hear in the comments section, are there things you think I'm right about? Then say it. Have I missed some weapons? Are there something I'm wrong about? Put it in the comments section. I'm here to learn and become better at understanding the world. And hopefully also helping other people to understand how war is fought and how not to fight a war. So I guess I'll terminate it here. Just wish you a great life in freedom and democracy. Goodbye.